The Legend of Zelda, The War of Imprisonment, Chapter 4, Light, Love, and Tears. The storm continued to grow. The rain now whipped sideways over the landscape as fearsome lightning shattered treetops and sent them crashing down. A Hylian woman, badly hurt and fleeing the destruction of her noble home, stumbled and staggered her way into the lost woods, carrying her infant son. She knew the danger of entering the forbidden forest, but the murderous raiders that had tracked her to the forest's edge brought certain death. Her child, a baby boy, less than a year old, screamed and wailed at the terrifying storm and grabbed at his mother's blouse for comfort. She did everything she could to shield him from the rain and whispered soothing words into his ears. But her strength was failing. The blood that poured from her side had not stopped, and her vision was becoming clouded. Finally, at the base of a small hill, she collapsed. Laying there in the cold mud, the urge to sleep and surrender to the inevitable steadily grew. Her husband was dead, her house and lands burned. She was lost and bleeding to death. There was no hope. The distant screams of her child rippled through her. Mother's love forced her to remain conscious as she opened her eyes and crawled to her swaddled child, crying and covering its eyes from the storm. When she reached him, she could do little more than whisper to him and brush his cheek with one hand. "Shh, it's okay, my love. It's just the rain. Don't be afraid." The wind whipped and curled about the forest, causing the trees to groan and sway in the darkness. The woman lifted her eyes up toward the top of the hill. Though her vision was blurring, in the flashes of lightning she could see a massive tree standing at the hilltop. Its canopy stretched far above the rest of the forest, and its roots plunged down to the base of the hill. With each flash, she thought the tree had the shape of a worn old man looking down at her. Was it a trick of the light, or was her mind just failing her? She did not know. "Please," she whimpered, "please help. I cannot leave him. There is no one else." The great old tree just continued to stare down at the helpless mother and her child. Her life slipping away, she continued to plead, "Please, my love," until her cheek sank into the mud and darkness took her. As the child continued to wail for its mother's comfort, the wind and the rain over the great tree's grove quickly stopped, and the forest fell silent. The mother's body faded away into a soft blue light as the baby was gently lifted and carried to its new forest home. 13 years later. The last knight of Hyrule rode hard away from the capital. His mind raced over everything that had happened. What am I to do? Where is Princess Zelda? Where do I take this boy? The boy! The lieutenant brought his mount to a halt and quickly checked his surroundings. All was quiet, save the gathering sounds of war back at the city, but that was far enough behind him now. He slid down from his horse and gently lowered Link to the ground. The boy was very badly burned and had many open wounds. "Goddess, help me," the knight murmured as he set to binding Link's injuries. The soldier's pack was missing from this horse, either lost in the battle or never hitched in the rushed muster. "He doesn't have a chance without a healer," thought the knight. "Here, take some water," he whispered as he gently cradled his head and poured a small amount of water from his water skin into Link's mouth. Link said nothing, but drank. Slowly, his breathing began to grow raspy and weak. Link groaned and began to shake. "Please, Zelda," he muttered. "What?" asked the knight. "What about Zelda? Do you know where she is? Answer me, boy!" but Link only groaned and drifted deeper into shock. Navi, hiding behind Link when he stood against Aghanim, was knocked away by the lightning strike. She recovered and got back into the air in time to see the lieutenant ride away with Link and the Master Sword. She raced after them, but the lieutenant's horse was fast, and Navi's small wings could not keep up. Eventually, she found him far to the southeast, sheltering in a small thicket next to the Zora River. Landing on the horse's saddle, she meant to catch her breath until she saw Link's wounds. "Get away from him!" she squeaked as she shot past the knight's ear and landed on Link's chest. The lieutenant recoiled in surprise at the sudden appearance of the fairy. "Who are you?" he cried. Navi ignored him and pressed her ear against Link's chest. "Please, please, please be okay," she whispered. Very faintly, Navi could hear Link's heartbeat, but it was weak and irregular. You know him," mumbled the lieutenant. Who is this boy? How does he know Princess Zelda?" he demanded. But Navi was ignoring him. Her mind raced, and her wings twitched fervently as she considered what had to be done. A sudden, jarring convulsion from Link made up her mind. Standing on Link's chest, she reached out and gently placed her hand on Link's chin. The soft, elegant blue light that surrounded her form began to grow brighter. "I, Navi, have sworn to protect you. Take now my light, that your wounds may be healed and your life preserved. Live, Link, live, and remember my love." Navi's light grew still brighter until it became a brilliant white ball. The knight could only stare in wonder at what he was seeing. "Alphon, take them both to Lake Hylia," the fairy's voice echoed from far away. "Watch over him in my stead, I entreat thee." Navi's light flashed out, and she was gone. For a few seconds, everything in the thicket seemed to remain motionless and silent. Only the gentle sound of the flowing river nearby was heard. Link gasped suddenly and sat bolt upright. His wounds had closed, and his color was restored. "Navi!" he shouted as he frantically looked around, but his voice only echoed off the nearby rocks and trees. Slowly, he reached up and placed his hand on his chest, where Navi had stood. She had been there, but she was not there anymore. As his eyes drew down to his healed hands, the icy pain of what had really happened began to creep into his heart. His eyes slowly welled, and he clenched both hands into fists. "No," he whimpered. "Don't go." Knight Lieutenant Alphon sat on the road, stunned, for several seconds after the sudden disappearance of Navi. Link knew he was there, but paid no attention to him. At the edge of memory, like a long-forgotten dream, Navi had come to him and held him close. "You will be okay, Link," she soothed as her warm, brilliant light surrounded him. She was tall now, tall as a Hylian woman, and beautiful. "Live, and remember my love." He wrapped his arms tightly around her. She was warm, and her skin felt soft against his cheek. Link could smell the trees of the forest and hear the leaves in the wind. Navi smiled down at him and held him in a warm embrace, her silky wings wrapping around him like a blanket. "This is what it's like to have a mother," Link thought. The light was growing brighter, and her warmth seemed to wash over him. He looked up at her and saw tears in her eyes as she smiled lovingly down at him. And then she was gone. The dream shattered, and the cold wind on his face was all that remained. Alphon had never seen a fairy before. He had long considered them a superstition of the country folk, and dismissed the stories of their magic ability to heal dying Hylians. A harsh cry from the north brought Alphon back to his senses. Ganon's minions were searching for them, and likely had their scent. "Come on," he said as he got to his feet. We need to reach the lake. Link said nothing. He remained sitting on the road, staring at his hands. He could still feel the warmth on his cheek, her delicate wings wrapped around his shoulders, but it was fading rapidly in the cold morning air. Alphon pitied the boy, but they could not spare the time. He lifted Link up and mounted his horse. All we can do is find Princess Zelda, he said. Zelda, murmured Link. End of Chapter 4.